D. Maceman, Ginendonic, 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen here with you, David Janes as well. We've got lots to discuss today with lots of different people. Chris Mason, Predators television analyst, will join us in the next segment to talk about the Predators. Jonathan Hutton will join us in the 12 o'clock hour from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. We'll get into the Super Bowl, the NFL draft, all the things. And then I'm excited about this one personally, and I'm sure Willie is too. And you too, Derek. We're all excited. Mark Byington, Vanderbilt men's basketball coach, will join us at 1 o'clock. Another tough loss for the Commodores last night, leading at halftime at Florida, but the Gators pull away in the second half.
That was... I texted you guys. I thought the refs was so inconsistent yesterday.
I thought you were talking about the NFL referees.
No.
Which we will also discuss
we'll talk
today
about them as well. But in that game, because there were times where they were just letting them play, and Florida,
it got very physical.
Yeah, Florida's coach was beside himself at times. And I'm sure Vandy's coach was at too, but you couldn't see him on the television. And then they switched it up. It just kept it felt to me they kept going back and forth. Like, okay, we are allowed the physical play now, but we're not going to allow it right now.
I didn't think. Look, I'm watching it from a Vanderbilt perspective. Vanderbilt needed some breaks if you're going to win at Florida. Florida is unbelievable in Gainesville. Florida looked like
and
a
they
different
even have
team.
Their best score.
Florida laid a big egg. Florida's number 5 in the Ken Pom ratings, right? This is a powerful team. They didn't even have their leading scorer last night, and they still had a lot of length, size, quickness, everything you want. And their coach is a creep who got away with, I think, some really bad shenanigans. Title IX stuff, and Title IX doesn't even really explain what he did. He did some creepy stuff. That aside, he can coach. He is a good coach. So they know what they're doing, and they have a lot of talent, and in that building, they're good. So Vanderbilt needed some breaks, and I didn't think they got a call for a lot of ticky-tack fouls. Vanderbilt plays very aggressive man-to-man defense.
Especially the call against Carey at the end, where the defender pushed off on the guard, and then Carey jumped straight in the air.
Yes.
And it was calls like that they would let go like 3 possessions prior, but then that happened, and it's like it should have been a double foul if that's the case.
Yeah.
But they didn't call it.
That said, I thought Vanderbilt played a really good first 30, 32 minutes. They're staying even with a really good team. And then Florida found a whole new level. They brought a guy off the bench who hit back-to-back threes who hadn't really played at all. It goes in there, boom, boom, 2 daggers from long range. I don't know what they shot from 3 in the second half, but it had to be 70%.
Oh, you're talking about
Florida.
Okay.
They ended up 10 for 21 from 3. That's tough to defend when they have the size advantage. So it was not a bad loss. I thought Vanderbilt played well. It wasn't like Saturday where they weren't playing quite as good a team. Oklahoma was a good team. But they just laid an egg in the second half. That was just out of nowhere. That's not good. They played a pretty solid game last night. Saturday's game against Texas is enormous. Enormous. You got to hold serve, and that won't be easy. Texas is awfully, awfully talented.
You better get to Memorial Gym for that one. But we will discuss all of this with Mark Byington, Vanderbilt men's basketball coach, at 1 o'clock. So Derek brought up the referees. And I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So we know that there are conspiracy theories floating around out there, just in life in general, but specifically about the Kansas City Chiefs and whether the refs are in the bag for the Kansas City Chiefs. So first, Roger Goodell, who does his State of the NFL address during Super Bowl week, he was asked about the perception of favoritism with the referees and the Kansas City Chiefs. Here's what Roger Goodell had to say.
Officiating has favored the Chiefs, not my perception, public perception. How much of a concern is that for you in the league?
Well, this sort of reminds me a little bit of the script, right? That I write a script, and I have the script for the entire season. Listen, I think from a lot of A lot of those theories are things that happen in social media, and they get a new life. As you say, it's not your theory, but it's out there. Nobody wants it to be their theory. And so I understand that. I think it reflects a lot of the fans' passion. And I think it also is a reminder for us how important officiating is. And I think the men and women that officiate in the NFL are outstanding. They have the highest possible standards. That's ridiculous theory for anyone who might take it seriously. But at the end of the day, it's something we always have to continue to work on. How do we make our officiating better at all times? And if you look at the Chiefs' record, which I think is an amazing thing, people talk about the competitiveness of our league. The Chiefs, with their 15 wins, 15-2 this year, 11 of those 15 games were within one score. And I think that talks about the competitiveness of our game and the importance of how we officiate it, but also the competitiveness of how we play it.
So that was Roger Goodell, but that wasn't it. After those comments, the NFL Referees Association, which I didn't know was a thing, it's the union representing all NFL officials, put out a statement in support of those comments from Roger Goodell. Here is an actual quote from this news release. Quote, Commissioner Goodell's comments that it is ridiculous to presume that NFL officials are not doing everything possible to make the right call at every play is spot on. Officiating crews do not work the same team more than twice each regular season. It is insulting and preposterous to hear conspiracy theories that somehow 17 officiating crews consisting of 138 officials are colluding, which is a great word, to assist one team. You know what my first response to that is? Sounds like someone who has something to cover up would say. No, I'm just kidding. But I saw some of the questions that were being asked of the Chiefs players during Super Bowl Media Day. There was one to Patrick Mahomes that was like, Patrick, a lot of people have helped you get to where you are today. Where would you rank the referees on that list? Somebody asked Travis Kelce, who do you love more, Taylor Swift or Phantom roughing the passer calls? Like it's certainly a storyline in all of this, even if it is ridiculous and insulting and preposterous. But you are not going to escape this talk through the remainder of this week, and especially if a call goes the Chiefs' way and them winning their third consecutive Super Bowl.
Listen, whether you think it's ridiculous or preposterous that people would think that, hey, listen, this is what they think. And, why do they think it or why do they believe it? Because, listen, in every sport, just about, there's rules. And then there's individual rules. You can go around a sport where, it's like, okay, yeah, and the most famous is the Jordan rules. It's like everybody knew that Jordan more times than not was going to get the benefit of the doubt. He just was. If it was a slap if he slapped somebody on the wrist at the defensive end, then came back down on the offensive end, and you slapped him on the wrist and they felt it impeded him in any way, he was going to get the call. That's just the way it is. Does that mean that you're colluding amongst all of the other refs? No. It's just you read the temperature of the league. You're not oblivious to who's the face of the league, who's running the league, and who's not. These refs act as if they sit in a cave after the game and don't watch no football, no other games. They don't watch no other sports. They're not on any social media. They don't read any papers. They act as if they go into their cave knowing nothing, come back out, and there's no sort of built-in biases. There are. And the only way that you change them is that you get instant replay on some of these things.
So, Willie, I was reading a story from The Ringer. The headline, do the Chiefs really get all the calls? A Ringer investigation. I thought it was really interesting.
Okay,
And
tell me what you found, because I always have my general feeling about this subject, whether we're talking about the Chiefs or a different team in another sport.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead.
So these were some of the hypotheses that the writer came up with for why it feels like the referees favor the Chiefs. The first one that he pointed out was, he said, quote, this is, I believe, written by Roger Sherman, quote, the defining penalty of the Chiefs dynasty has been defensive holding. There are seemingly two types of pass plays in Kansas City's offense, the ones where a receiver gets open and the ones where a receiver is allegedly prevented from getting open by a hold. Since 2018, Kansas City has benefited from 86 total defensive holding penalties in regular and postseason games, the most in the league by a massive margin. Houston is second, having benefited from 59. In 4 of the 7 seasons of the Mahomes era, the Chiefs were at least tied for drawing the most defensive holding calls in the league. If each defensive holding call was a catch by a Kansas City receiver named defensive holding, DH would rank 13th in receptions in the Mahomes era between Isaiah Pacheco and Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
Wow.
And then, of course, they mentioned the defensive holding call in the previous Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles that helped the Chiefs ultimately win that game. So that was one of the theories, defensive holding.
The Juju Smith-Schuster hold. And then listen.
You defended the
Yeah,
call.
I defended it for call.
You and I had a
defended the
fun
call,
discussion
yes.
about that.
I
It was
defended the
spirited 'cause
call.
I thought
But
that
those
should
are
have
the
been a no
things,
call.
yeah. But those are the calls that people look at and say,
See,
seriously?
I'm much more interested in those types of studies than the conspiracy when we asked the commissioner. Like,
Exactly,
yeah, I'm
What
the
is he
commissioner.
supposed to
Yeah,
say?
I want the Chiefs to be in there. See, that to me, that's a bunch of garbage. But does it influence referees subconsciously where a star player gets benefit of the doubt? I think that's a real human nature thing. It's not an intentional thing, I don't think, but it
happens.
It happens in sports, all sports. I'll give you another one that comes to mind when you read off those stats, Adam. Remember the Sunday night game? What year would it have been? I think 2 years ago. Yeah, it was when.
Are you referring to the holding call on Derwin James that overturned a 3rd and 4 incompletion into a first down?
I'll tell you what I was thinking.
That's mentioned in here.
Titans Chiefs.
Okay.
Sunday
So
night.
this was Chiefs Chargers.
This was a game where Ryan Tannehill had the high ankle sprain. The Titans, I think they were still very much in contention, winning games, and they had Malik Willis playing quarterback. Remember this game?
Yep.
Derrick Henry and company, they had a very conservative game plan. They hardly threw the ball. Derrick Henry had some early success. They had a lead, and they were playing great, tough defense against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs ended up coming back and winning the game in a real ugly, the kind of game the Chiefs always win. I think it was 19-17. Maybe we can look this up. But there was a play down in the end zone where Travis Kelce got a defensive holding call, and I feel like he got maybe 2 or 3 in a row. And Mike Vrabel on the sideline was just dumbfounded because it just didn't seem like they were going to let the Titans get the stop. You have to be physical on Travis Kelce. But I feel like they got like 2 in a row, and then on the third one, they got it to Kelce. They got a big 2-point conversion. I think it was a 2-point conversion. It might have been a touchdown. But that was a great example of what you just talked about that is backed up statistically, right?
One texter wonders what the stats are on how many roughing the passer calls. Well, I do have an answer for you on that, according to this story from The Ringer. There's a broad assumption that officials are trying to protect Mahomes, the league's chosen one. But according to the writer's personal favorite single-purpose website, NFLpenalties.com, Mahomes gets a high but not ridiculous number of roughing calls. Among active quarterbacks, Mahomes ranks below Josh Allen, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins in career roughing penalties per game, and roughing penalties per 100 passing attempts. Mahomes is 4th in the sample size in roughing penalties per sack, but he's wedged between Goff and Jimmy Garoppolo, hardly indicating he's getting particularly special treatment.
What about along the sideline? I feel like Mahomes does get a lot of...
I don't think that's in here.
Unnecessary roughness as he goes out of bounds on runs.
Here's another one.
That's another one I'd like to see.
Here's another one about one of the hypotheses on why the Chiefs get the calls. The refs are clutch. The refs might not be making more calls against the Chiefs' opponents than the average team, but holy hell, do they know when to make them. Mahomes is credited with 30 game-winning drives in his career, per Pro Football Reference. On 12 of those, the opposing defense was flagged for at least one penalty. So that's 40%. 6 of the penalties on Mahomes' game-winning drives were what the reporter would call drive-saving penalties. Plays where a turnover or failed third or fourth down conversion attempt was wiped out. On 4 of them, the Chiefs received a first down, and 3 of those drive-saving plays on game-winning drives have taken place in standalone, nationally televised games. After a full Sunday of watching football, the last thing we see is Kansas City nearly losing before a penalty saves its behind. Then we're mad about it from Monday to the next Sunday.
Wow.
I mean, okay, that could be, in theory, that could be a lot of why people think that Kansas City gets the bulk of the calls, or the calls are skewed toward Kansas City. Why? Because it's in crucial times that these penalties occur. It's not like these penalties are occurring in the first quarter, second quarter, something like that, third. No, a lot of these penalties that people are actually looking at, and we named off 2. The one in the Super Bowl drive, when it was the phantom holding call on Philadelphia against Juju Smith-Schuster, and then the other one with the roughing the quarterback or pass interference on Travis Kelce. It's like, it's not that they happen, because they're going to happen. It's almost like when they happen, and it's almost like, oh, they're about to lose. Oh my goodness. They got another penalty.
Well,
I found the numbers. Now,
Okay.
Listen to this. Now, you tell me this doesn't line exactly up with the defensive holding thing. All right. Here's the situation. Fourth quarter, Titans lead the Chiefs. Let's see. What is the score? It is 17-9 in favor of the Titans. Fourth quarter, Arrowhead Stadium. Patrick Mahomes scrambles and scores a touchdown to make it 17-15. They go for 2. Now, Titans fans might remember, this is a Sunday night game at Arrowhead. They're trying to pull the upset with Malik Willis at quarterback. They might have completed 7 passes the whole night.
Yeah, it was about 6 or 7.
2-point conversion attempt. Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce. Incomplete. Penalty. Christian Fulton. Defensive holding. Offset by an ineligible player downfield. They run it again. Penalty. Jones. Defensive holding. 2-point conversion attempt. Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce. Incomplete. Attempt fails. Penalty on, who was this player on the Titans? Kalu. What was
Josh
his-
Kalu?
Josh
Josh
Kalu.
Kalu.
Josh
Kalu.
Kalu. Defensive holding.
Is that 3 consecutive
Yeah,
defensive
3
holdings?
3
consecutive.
consecutive defensive holding. And then Mahomes runs it in from the 1-yard line, and it's tied 17-17.
There you go.
Mike Vrabel was absolutely beside himself. Twice on Kelce.
So that's,
I mean,
speaks-
again,
that's
This
that's
is a
what
real
we're
life
discussing.
example of what
But that-
the numbers.
It goes to what you
Yeah.
were saying. It's not like they get a lot of penalties called in their favor. It's just when it's always a game-saving penalty that allows Kansas City to continue on their on that particular drive.
And talking about the refs being quote unquote clutch, Roger Sherman writes, it's possible that it is just a result of circumstance. Kansas City has played in 78 one-possession games since 2018, the most in the league. It's also played in 20 postseason games since 2018, the most in the league. If the Chiefs are playing more close games and more postseason games than anybody else, it stands to reason that they'll be in the most big-time games affected by big-time calls.
That's fair. And I think a Chiefs fan would say, well, hey, remember the game where they had the Patriots beat, and the Patriots got some breaks.
But
when
that
Tom
was
Brady,
the clear offsides on that one play.
That wasn't the only play. There were some plays. I mean,
But that was the
and
winning
It was
play.
such a close game.
But
too.
that was the winning play, because if he doesn't jump off sides, the play is
I'm talking about
called
the AFC
incomplete.
Championship
Yeah,
game,
yeah.
right?
The play is
At
called
Arrowhead.
incomplete. Yeah, the play is called incomplete. The game's over with. But they get another shot at it,
Yeah.
and they score.
So the Chiefs would say, well, Brady used to get those calls
Yeah.
too. Like I
And
can,
he
I can
probably
see that.
did.
Yeah.
But that goes along to what I was saying. It's like in every sport, there's that one guy or girl. And more times than not, they're going to err on the side of that person, especially when we're talking about the critical moments of a game into the second quarter, going into halftime, and then the fourth quarter, that last drive. That's when I think, like you said, Willie, it's not like it's just almost like it's built in them already, that inner bias in a sense, and they may not even know it, and they will give them a call rather than let the game be played.
All I can think about when I hear this sort of conversation, did either of you watch The Wire by
Yes.
chance?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking of the scene. I have to clean it up because there are some
PG, please.
PG-13 words. But I am reminded of Idris Elba playing Stringer Bell and saying to one of his, soldiers, "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy?" Like that. I don't know why I thought about that, but clearly everybody is colluding. I am a big fan of collusion, but
hey, we all love it.
but I
You
thought
can't beat Stringer Bell.
no.
Pretty solid show. That's
No.
a good show.
I thought that was a good nuanced look
Mhm.
at why it appears that the Chiefs get all the calls. But despite the fact that we laid it out as such, I have to imagine that on Monday we're going to be in here. The Chiefs win the Super Bowl, maybe. A questionable call goes in their favor, and we're going to be having this conversation all over again. But I'm hoping that maybe for those of you out there who believe that the refs are in it for the Chiefs, maybe this changed your mind. Maybe you didn't, but we at least presented the data from Roger Sherman of The Ringer. We'll see what happens on Sunday in the Super Bowl. 615-737-1025. Chris Mason, Predators TV analyst, will join us coming up next. Speaking of the Predators fans, don't miss Smashville Live tonight at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock. See your Predator star players up close and personal. You can also get autographs and pictures. Tonight's player guests are Justin Barron and Nick Blankenburg. Justin Barron and Nick Blankenburg. That's tonight at Brewhouse 100, 6 o'clock in Bellevue.
Okay, let's tell you about Loan Pronto. Remember, they've got the model for you if you need to get cash out of your home's equity. It is a process that is a lot more streamlined, organized, easier than it used to be back in the days of a lot of paperwork. It's all digital now. They've got AI technology. It's got a lot of tools to make this a lot easier to get that cash in your hands so you can go do what you need to do to pay bills, start a home improvement project, pay tuitions, whatever it might be that is on your mind. For example, Loan Pronto has several easy options to let you access that cash. No paperwork, no cumbersome process, no jump fees, often no appraisal. The average homeowner saves money when they're doing this. One client got $150,000 out, paid off their credit cards, 2 car loans, and a personal loan, cutting their monthly expenses by $1,500. It can be done. Find out more by calling Loan Pronto at 615-499-5780. Or just go to their website, loanpronto.com. 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Chris Mason, Predators television analyst. Chris, yesterday we were having a conversation about some of the hard questions the Predators have to ask themselves. Obviously, when a team is struggling, a lot of people look to the coach. We spent a lot of time this season talking about the job that Andrew Brunette has done. A word that has come up a lot in these conversations, and you and I have talked about this previously, the word system. People use it. They don't necessarily know exactly what it means or what the system exactly entails, and I'm guilty of that too. I'm guilty of that too sometimes. But my question for you is, if there were any tweaks that you would make to Andrew Brunette's system, especially down the stretch here, where it seems like a lot of the games in terms of the standings won't mean much. If you were to suggest any tweaks to the system, what would you do?
Well, the one thing, and there's been a lot of talk about, Bruno's system and what it is. And a lot of it is systematic. There is method to the madness. But a lot of his system is based on anticipation and reads and, anticipating the best way to get back on offense. Obviously, defensively, it changes a little bit and becomes a little more structured, but it's same thing. It's quick moving. It's fast. It's how fast can we get the puck back? And this year there's definitely been some challenges. And I think at the beginning of the year, and the beginning of last season when he was implementing it, he knew full well, and everybody, it's going to take time to get this. And it did. And once they were able to get it last year, it seemed to really work for them. And this year, when you add, 3 players that have played a certain way, I'd say, more traditional hockey sense in the aspect of it's more positional and you're here and you're here and you're here. And it's an easy breakdown. Hey, if there's a breakdown on a play, it's because, X, Y, and Z wasn't in the right spot. And now it's more of a read and react and try to push up the pace. So a lot of it's going to look different all the time. So, if I was going to make a suggestion, I would, just do something that would be a little more, maybe a hybrid. I know he has tweaked it in the past at points during this season as something that's a little more of a base to it, to say, okay, well, this is what went wrong in this situation. You went, you didn't go, we have to go together type of a thing. And, I mean, at this point, I don't know if it's anything systematic, but if I were, to maybe try to implement something at a certain point, probably would have been something more along the traditional lines. Although, having said that, I think the way Andrew Brunette wants to play hockey has the ability to make a team that maybe doesn't have the fastest skaters, the ability to play fast. But it did take a while, as I think we all recognized, Brady Shea, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault at the first part of the season, when essentially you look back now, that kind of put them in this situation where they're unable to endure a rough patch here and there because they got so far behind. It took a while for them to get it. And I think, Andrew Brunette's been on record saying, that was to be expected and understood, but he was a little more disappointed on the guys that essentially, in quotations, figured out the way to play last year and were unable to kind of, push that forward in this season. So I would just, that would be my only tweak that I might say, is just make something that, okay, everybody's brought up playing this way and we can tweak it from there. But that would be my only way. But I think his thinking was, if we just keep doing it like they did last year, they proved that they can get it, that they will. And once they do, they're able to have a high level of success with it.
You touched on something that I actually wanted to ask you. When this season started, and we knew that there was going to be an adjustment period for the new players, but I thought that because most of the players were familiar with Andrew Brunette's system entering the season, that they would carry the load, so to speak. They would mitigate some of the growing pains that Stamkos and Marchessault and Shea would experience. That obviously did not happen. So my question is, should we expect this to happen every season? Because I imagine that Barry Trotz is going to add some new players to the lineup in the offseason, and those players are going to have an adjustment period. So I'm just wondering, with the way that Brunette's system is, should we expect a slow start every year? Or do you just look at this as a blip on the radar, so to speak?
Well, my feeling on that is every time you do something and it doesn't work or you fail, you find reasons why. And I look back to the beginning of the season, and I think honestly a large part of it was you bring in star players who are obviously big personalities, big presence, all-star resumes, a Hall of Fame resume. And a big part of Burnett's season was finding ways to get to the interior. And I felt this year's system aside, I felt that to me was the biggest part, because I feel a lot of people defer to, like, let's say a Tommy Novak playing with Marchessault and Stamkos at the beginning of the year. Oh, I'm playing with Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. They won Stanley Cups and an MVP and this and that. I feel a lot of the younger players and the veteran players deferred to try to get them the puck a lot more in situations where they were probably better off taking it to them or simplifying their game and playing a simple brand of hockey the way that they were able to do last year. That was extremely effective for them, and it turned them into a perimeter team. And when you look at the team last year, if you put roster on roster, you'd say there's no way that last season's team is going to be a better offensive team than the one that they have this year. But it was, and it was much more effective because of their ability to get to the inside and dominate those areas. And, once they got down that rabbit hole of perimeter and it's not working and blah, 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 and then it became a thing, it's just, you can't just turn that on. You can't get that back. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of playing. It's a mindset. And, we are where we are now. I mean, 16 points out of the 7th and 8th team in the wild card. And then, you're 7 points or 6 points out of last place in the league, so it's, to me, it was more of that in conjunction with knowing the players were going to take a lot of time. And I just don't think they had maybe the proper mindset with all those big guys coming in. And I think that was an issue early on that really kind of plagued them in the first 30 games.
Now, C-Mace, we're talking with Chris Mason. C-Mace, are you concerned with this team, with the trading deadline looming, that they may lose sort of that edge, even though whether you're winning or you're losing, you never want to lose that thing on the ice or on the field that is going to cause you to just say, you know what, this season's done. I'm just going to play it out and get myself focused for next year. Are you afraid of that happening, or have you seen any indications of that potentially happening?
Well, I think right now, when change happens, and obviously I think at this point it's inevitable, I think that's a good, with the break coming up, I think is another good opportunity for players to kind of get away and just completely reset their mindset and just, decompress and get a new lease on life, if you will. But, we've seen this team do that before. I think, back when they traded Ekholm and, Granlund and everybody, and they were trying to maybe do a soft rebuild or get, some assets for some of the guys on expiring contracts. I think we've seen how they've reacted in that situation where it kind of rejuvenates you almost. And you're like, you have to reprove yourself. You do worry about that for some of the veteran players. But I don't think there's a character issue with this team. That's one thing I'm not worried about. I think the guys in there kind of understand, have a lot of pride. And I think, they have so much pride that they would never allow themselves to do that. I feel right now, I think when you see post-game interviews, especially the last couple of games when, they went on that 5-game winning streak, it was the life and the joy was coming back into their game, their body language and the way that they carried themselves and everything. And I think now you're kind of seeing that dip again, just because it's so frustrating in the last 2 games in particular, extremely, disappointing with what's at stake in the season and the situation and trying to get out of this funk. But I'm not too worried about that. I actually think it'll have the adverse effect where, you have X amount of games left in the season and you want to just, the least we can do is finish strong here. I expect them to have some younger players in the lineup going down the stretch, and they'll be looking to prove themselves and try to make an impact for, potential roster spot next season. And with the star guys and the veteran guys, they want to salvage the season any way they can. And I think if you can go with a good feeling, I think at least you can go into the off season with, feeling good about the way things ended up and have some excitement looking toward next season.
We're talking to Chris Mason, and Mace, you and I have spent some time on the recent broadcast, and it's tough because the game moves so fast. You can't really have a deep conversation, but so this is a better place for me to ask you this. your evaluation of UC Saros, because it's so easy to say, here's a guy who's 11, 22, and 6, save percentage 901, goals against 287, and say from afar, hey, I thought UC Saros was one of the best goalies. Why isn't he elevating them? There's a lot more that goes into it. I could give you a lot of analytics numbers too, but how does it pass your eye test? How would you evaluate Juice to this point?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no question he hasn't had his best season. There's a lot of reasons why, and I think it helps when you put things in context. The league save percentage is down overall at a really high drop off compared. It's been trending down the last few years, just the way the league's been playing. There's players are a lot more selective with what shots they take, meaning they're not just going to come down the wing and just try to get those high shot attempts. If you remember the Predators, under Laviolette in that era, it was all about quantity. Get the puck, shoot the puck, get it back, keep shooting it, regardless of kind of where you are on the ice. And I think now teams are more tactical and patient and when they decide to actually shoot the puck, because it moves so fast, and because I think if you wait a little bit longer in the skill level of guys, they can get it in better areas. So you're going to get less shots. You're going to get less, of those freebies, if you will. And, the other thing that I do is put it in context to other guys in the league. If you look as a goaltender, it's one position in sports. I don't even know if there's any other position really like this, where you have so much of an impact where you cannot dictate a single thing that is happening in front of you. You just have to react what's coming at you. You can't change the game in any way, offensively or defensively. You just have to make that save when there's breakdowns. And I think you're a product of your environment. And I don't think the Predators have been particularly strong defensively this year, quite the opposite. And if you look at guys like, Sergei Bobrovsky, who went to a Stanley Cup final, who's, won a Stanley Cup and all these types of things, I would put him in that category, but he's on a team that can score goals. I mean, his stat line is worse than Saros, but I would say that, he's had a good season because he's winning hockey games. And I think that gets overshadowed. Igor Shesterkin just signed for whatever it was, $11 or $12 million a year for 8 more years. And, the same kind of thing, but, they have their own issues. But if you look at a lot of guys around them, the Rangers aren't great defensively. So you get exposed no matter if you're a superstar goalie or not. When your team isn't good defensively, it doesn't matter how good of a goaltender you are, because you're going to face more high danger situations. You're going to start, I know from playing on both sides, good defensive teams, bad defensive teams. When you play on a team that struggles defensively, there's more bad things that can happen per situation. So instead of saying, well, I know I have to worry about the shot because the back door is taken away, so I can just kind of focus and square my body for this situation because that's covered. When you play for a team where there's lapses, you kind of have to anticipate and maybe set yourself up for the next pass or the next play that could happen. So you get caught leaning, you get caught, guessing a little bit, and anticipation. And that's creeped into his game a little bit. I think this season he's played really well, I think the last 3 games, but it makes you more prone to inconsistency, I think. And I think we've seen that.
Chris Mason, Predators television analyst, joining us here on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Chris, great stuff as always, my friend. Talk soon.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Chris Mason joining us on the program, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Barry Trotz. We are going to evaluate his performance so far as Predators general manager. If you have some early thoughts on how you feel Barry Trotz has done, you can get them in on our phone and text line, 615-737-1025. Duncan fans, we're all Duncan fans here. Come experience the new age of Duncan at the grand opening of their newly remodeled Brentwood location at 4930 Thoroughbred Lane this Friday. Duncan will be giving away 100 days of free coffee to the first 100 guests in line starting at 8 a.m. Plus, Robbie and Rexroad will be there, broadcasting live from 6 to 9 a.m., and they'll have Predators tickets to give away. This week, Stoneman and Company is broadcasting live and providing live updates from New Orleans on Radio Row leading up to the big game. I don't know if we can say the other thing.
You're not supposed to say it, but really, they really don't think we know that. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've.
Hey, don't say it.
I don't
Don't
know.
say it.
That happened how many years ago?
But we
this
say
happened?
it in the context of other conversations.
so
Yeah, but
dumb.
we can't say it now. Don't
Coverage
say it.
presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, Family Leisure, Shane Company, and Volunteer Hose and Gasket. We all know what the big game is.
Of course.
It's Vanderbilt.
Harvard, Yale.
It's Texas this weekend. We'll talk to Mark Byington at 1:00. So let's talk Barry Trotz. Because when Barry Trotz returned to Nashville, I would venture to say that most of you, like us, were excited. Barry Trotz is a legend in this town. He's not just a wonderful person, but he has the skins on the wall as a coach in the NHL.
Mhm.
And he was undertaking a new role as a GM. He came in the middle of that season a few years ago, was learning under the tutelage of David Poile as David Poile was transitioning toward retirement. I remember talking to David Poile and talking about the crash course that he gave Barry Trotz on how to be a GM. And he said, I don't know if anybody else could have gotten a better education on the fly like Barry Trotz, considering David Poile was in front offices for more than 50 years. And early on in Barry Trotz's tenure, I would say, gentlemen, he didn't make a lot of mistakes. He had a say in the moves that were made at the deadline a few years ago, trading Matthias Ekholm, trading Tanner Jeannot, Mikhail Granlund, Nino Niederreiter. He traded Ryan Johansson. He bought out Matt Duchene. And I know that Duchene is a productive player with the Dallas Stars, but he wasn't right for this mix in terms of leadership. The players he brought in free agency in his first dip into free agency, Ryan O'Reilly had a great year last season. Gus Nyquist had a great year last season. Luke Schenn has provided leadership. And I would venture to guess that most of you, and if you are someone who immediately first guessed, I guess you could say, the moves that the Predators made in free agency this past summer, I would love to see it. I was excited for them. I know most of you were excited for them. I did have my concerns about Steven Stamkos and Brady Shea specifically, and those have played out, unfortunately. But Barry Trotz finds himself in an interesting position because the honeymoon period was only going to last so long, right? He's Barry Trotz. In Nashville, that buys you a lot of time. It buys you a lot of goodwill. But with the team struggling this season, I think Barry Trotz is learning that being a GM is a tough job. Now, he's been in it. I mean, he's been in the game as a coach. He knows that being a coach is a tough job too. But I would love to get your guys' reaction, Willie and Derek, and then we'll also take your calls on the performance of Barry Trotz as GM. And if there's anything that he hasn't done or has done that maybe is something that he should look to improve on as he continues on as Predators GM.
I think if you do it long enough, you're going to realize that every GM is not going to bat 1,000. I do think Barry Trotz came in and a lot of moves that he made really worked well. I thought it probably could not have worked better during the regular season last year. And this year, it's been the polar opposite, right? Just about everything has not worked, and not just not worked, but not worked anywhere close to where they hoped that it would work. So you're somewhere in between. David Poile took plenty of criticism, and people would pick on, the low points. That is part of what happens, right? They're going to jump all over everything that doesn't work. David Poile did a lot of things that worked really, really well to be the winningest general manager in NHL history and a Hockey Hall of Famer, right? But people were excited for new blood when Barry Trotz came in. But all that to say, I think this is just part of the business. And now, as we discussed yesterday, there are really some tough decisions that are going to be made in this goal to bounce back next year and get back where you hope you can get, and that is with a chance to win playoff series. And it will not be easy. Some things have to go right for sure. I think Barry Trotz, and he's been, this is the great thing you can say about him. He did it again yesterday. He's had to go in there every week and admit that the decisions he's made haven't worked, right? He puts as much responsibility on himself as he does anybody else, right? What he thought was going to happen hasn't happened.
Yeah, I look at it from this standpoint. He's in quarters, meaning those that went to universities when you were in quarters, you got grades every quarter of the year. I was more so semesters, and it helped me out. But I think that's what it is with Barry right now. I think when he initially came in, the moves that he made, it seemed like they all worked. And then now it seems like, okay, the moves that he made at the beginning of the season, everybody's thought was, okay, based on the way they finished last year, man, this team can't help but go up. Well, now we're into that third quarter, and it's like, okay, this ain't working. What do you do now? I think that's going to be a part of whatever legacy he continues to set here. What does he do now after him spending all that money last year and it seemed to not be working? Does he pull a plug, or does he try to make another move to try to sort of extend what he did last season?
615-737-1025. We'll continue this conversation next. You can get in on it at 615-737-1025. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace, Finken, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Finken here with you. Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow will join us in the next segment. Before we get to Hutton, we'll continue our conversation on the Nashville Predators, specifically Barry Trotz and the job that he has done so far as Predators general manager. We have some of your texts to get to on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. One texter says, Barry gets a D this year. Misread Bruno's game plan and didn't provide the right players. One texter said, would have thought Trotz knew you need a balance of toughness and high-end players. This is a poorly constructed offense. On defense, they have soft D-men who can skate but aren't physically prepared for combat in front of Saros. Another texter says, my word is confusing. He talks about getting younger and playing faster, but we're the oldest team in the league. We haven't really developed any young players, and so he seems to be trying to do the fine line of this competitive balance that we've seen for the last 6 years. So let's stick with this idea, because we've seen this season, and if you want to include the offseason as well, an exodus of younger players. It started with the Predators trading Yaroslav Askarov. Now, that was a situation where the Predators' hands were tied because Askarov, through his agent, through, I believe it was Kevin Weeks of NHL Network, said that Yaroslav Askarov wanted to trade. They traded Philip Tomasino. They waived Dante Fabro. They've had certain amounts of success with their new clubs. And it's easy. We've talked about this many times before, Willie. When a player that was on your team goes somewhere else and plays well, people look at it as an indictment of your team. And sometimes that is the case, but not always. So the one challenge that Barry Trotz is going to have is, as we've talked about this week on the show, threading that needle of remaining competitive, because the Predators and Barry Trotz specifically have been adamant that they are not interested in doing a full-on rebuild. They do not want to ship off every player of value and put out a product where the team is going to lose more often than not, just for the hope that they get a top draft pick that changes it all. We've talked about it with the Titans this year with the number 1 pick. I can't recall who it was on Jared's show yesterday. I actually might have been Chris Mad Dog Russo, who, by the way, we've been watching First Take. The look on Chris Russo's face as he's just waiting to talk looks like he's sucking on a lemon. I don't know what's going on with Chris Russo today, but the faces he's making are very distracting. But Chris Russo said yesterday that this is not a good draft to have the number 1 pick. Now, you could say, what does Chris Russo know about this? But I think that is a general sentiment. But the Predators are not interested in doing a full tear-down rebuild. So how does Barry Trotz navigate this situation where he wants to remain competitive, but you have to make sure that you have the right mix of young and old to make it work?
I think that's the question. I think what you have to hope for is that because they have put a lot of time and investment going back even before Barry Trotz became the GM, that you have to hope that you've done a good job drafting and developing the next wave of young players. That is going to make his job a lot easier if they can hit on the number 8 rated prospect pool. And just because you're rated 8th doesn't mean that you're going to have 3 superstars emerge. In fact, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I don't know if they have stars there. They could really use 1 or 2 of these guys to pop beyond what they're tracking for right now. Do they have a lot of good, useful young players in the system? Yeah, they have a very deep pool. But how do you utilize those guys to get what you want? And that's a winning team. I do think it's going to be threading the needle. But that would be the case, I think, for most teams in the NHL right now. I don't know that you can look around the league and say, this team's set and they're set for the next 5 or 10 years. It's never that simple. It's always changing. The game's changing. Players get hurt. Guys don't pan out. I think your fortunes can go from not looking real good to looking really good pretty quick. I would look at Winnipeg the last couple years. There's been a lot of talk of, hey, Winnipeg might need to blow this thing up. They have unhappy players. But it wasn't long ago that Connor Hellebuck wanted out. They were trying to trade him. Mark Scheifele wanted out. They kind of doubled down on those guys, and they've gotten good results. So I do think it can go back and forth a lot during the year. So it's a very complicated question for sure. The answer to me lies in, can they get mileage out of this next crop of players that have been playing in Milwaukee the last 2 or 3 years? Can they be difference makers, especially to fortify what you hope you're going to still get from Forsberg, Yossi, Stamkos, Marcia? So the guys that we know are going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years.
And Derek, I contend that, let's say Barry Trotz didn't sign the free agents he signed this offseason. Let's say he signed different free agents. But a report emerged that the Predators were deep in talks with Steven Stamkos, and Steven Stamkos was interested in signing with the Predators. And ultimately, the Predators decided to go in a different direction. I have to imagine a lot of Predators fans would say, can you believe Barry Trotz didn't want Steven Stamkos? Now, again, there were warning signs that Steven Stamkos was becoming a diminishing player, specifically when he's not on the power play. But I imagine that a lot of fans, had the Predators not signed Stamkos, I'm just picking on Stamkos here. If they had not signed Stamkos and it emerged that the Predators decided that Stamkos wanted them and they decided they didn't want him, I imagine a lot of Predators fans would be calling and texting and saying, can you believe that? But Brian has a text on our text line that I think is interesting. He says, I believe if it were anyone but Trotz, fans would be furious and wanting a change. I get both sides, and it's hard to say many negative things about Trotz, but it's starting to look worse and worse game after game. That is an interesting thing in all of this because of how beloved Barry Trotz is in this town. I do think that's an interesting element.
Well, it goes again what we were talking about with the Kansas City Chiefs. Sometimes whether you are knowingly or unknowingly, and a lot of times I think it's unknowingly, you're going to give certain people the benefit of the doubt. Why? Barry has always approached it with transparency. He didn't try to say, listen, this is what we are going to do, or we're not doing this, but then end up, no. He kept the fan base, because when he's talking to Jared, he's not talking to Jared. He's talking to the fan base. And actually, Jared is asking questions, I guess from what he's been hearing or what people text him. But Barry he's been transparent. That buys you equity. It gets you equity when times are rough. Why? Because Barry not once said we are a Stanley Cup winning team. We will be in a Stanley Cup.
He made a point this offseason.
Exactly.
When everybody was super excited. What were the words he used? Fantasy hockey.
Exactly.
It's fantasy hockey until it works on the ice. And unfortunately for him and the team, it hasn't worked. But he has tempered expectations from the start.
Exactly. And I think people remember that. And he diffuses any and every sort of, not all of it, but majority of it, negative sort of talk that will come his way. Why? Because he told you on the front end. Now, you may not like where the team is at, but it's not like he tried to sell you up and then his team sort of, did what they did this season. He's not like what the Titans did. They tried to upsell everything and then you look and it's like, man, we're not a good team. He bought that equity that he needed, but also he understands that, hey, listen, I need to get better. This team needs to get better. So it's not like the fan base isn't disappointed, but I think some of them probably anticipated something like this happening, but they believe that Barry can get them out of it because of his transparency.
I go back to something you said earlier, Adam. We have some angry texters here. I really don't think you could have reasonably had. There weren't that many people saying, wow, this is going to flop. This is just not going to go well. Reasonably, you like you said, we discussed a lot of potential issues. Is Tommy Novak really a number 2 center? What about all the right-handed shots? What about the fact that Stamkos and Marchessault are going to brand new teams? All of these were fair questions for sure, and we discussed them. But to think it was going to go like this, that is some serious hindsight is 2020. I don't think anybody could have predicted it would have gone this wrong. And I have not seen a Predator team this snake bit in my entire career watching this team, which is from the very, very beginning. This has been unlike any other season. So there's a little bit of Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. That has been on top of some of the things that have turned out to be flawed, that there's always risk. You never know for sure what is going to happen, but the confluence of all of these things going wrong in 1 year, is that all because it was a bad decision by the GM? I don't think that's the case.
Who was Murphy, and why did he make the law?
I don't know why. Why is it Murphy's Law? I don't know.
I don't know.
But we've heard of Murphy's Law, right? There's a whole
Yes.
book of Murphy's Law,
Exactly.
right?
Absolutely.
And then there's Cole's Law,
Yeah.
which thinly sliced cabbage.
that,
Cole's Law.
that was a good dad joke, and you didn't even know it.
What one texter said,
No, that was a good one. I like that.
it took me a minute to get the coleslaw joke. I'm not gonna lie. One texter says, if I was wrong, if I was this wrong at work, I'd be fired. And I hear that, but I agree with Willie. There were some potential issues with the players that they signed this offseason. Jonathan Marchessault, who's in his early to mid 30s, had a 40-goal season last season, had never been a 40-goal scorer until last season. What was the likelihood that he was going to be a 40-goal scorer again? Steven Stamkos, and I mentioned this a lot during the offseason and at the beginning of the season, he was becoming a diminishing player at 5-on-5. We knew that on the power play, he would still be a prime-time scorer with his one-timer from the left circle. But he was struggling to help the Tampa Bay Lightning generate offense at 5-on-5 when he was playing with the likes of Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, who are elite players in the NHL. What was going to happen when he was all of a sudden playing with Tommy Novak? We discussed this. Was Brady Shea a product of the Carolina Hurricanes? They have a specific defensive system that they run, and Shea looked good in that system. What was going to happen when Brady Shea left that system? These are all things we discussed. But I'll repeat what I've said many times. We had all of our worst case scenarios planned out. What's happened this season far exceeds what our worst case scenarios
Yes.
were.
And
So I can't pin that. This is not to say that Barry Trotz is without fault, but I have a hard time pinning the fact that everything that could go wrong has gone wrong on Barry Trotz.
Right. I don't think Barry Trotz brought in Marchessault and Stamkos thinking I have to have 40 goals from each of these guys for it to work. I think if you look at Marchessault, he had a brutal start to the season and then a huge hot streak. But by the end of the year, he's probably going to have about an average Jonathan Marchessault season, pretty close to it, maybe a little bit below, right? I mean, his 82 game average is 29 goals and 33 assists. That's Jonathan Marchessault over the course of his career. So to think, hey, he's got to get 40, that's an unreasonable expectation. I don't think they had that expectation.
But the fans did, because all they
Well,
saw was
yeah.
40 goals, you know?
Right. But I think what I was thinking anyway was if you're giving a team who scored a lot of goals last year,
Mhm.
right? They were in the top 10 scoring goals last year. I think they were 10th in the league. And now you add two guys who are scorers. Forget about whether they end up with 25, 30, 35. In a given year, you're going to fluctuate some. But if you have good production from those two guys, that's going to take you to another level. That was the idea. And I thought it was a perfectly reasonable idea. Was trading Ryan McDonagh, an older defenseman, to getting a second-round pick in return and then taking his money and putting it at Brady Shea, who is 6 years younger, that was a perfectly reasonable idea at the time. But there has been a huge difference in what you got from McDonough last year and Shea this year. The question is, what are you going to get next year from these guys? That's where their mind is now.
615-737-1025. If you have stray thoughts on Barry Trotz and the Predators, we'll get to them over the course of the show at 615-737-1025. But coming up next, Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow will join us. This week's Nashville's best deal is Prince's Hot Chicken, the original and iconic hot chicken joint. Get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals. The gift card is only good for the Tanger Outlets location in Antioch and inside the Assembly Food Hall in downtown Nashville.
Hutton's coming on?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds like
I hope you figure things out.
I didn't realize we had an extra segment here, right? Of hockey.
Well, I timed it. Well, because
Hutton had to go at 12:25.
well, David said 12:15 before the show, and it was like, let's just move it to like whenever we're done with our first segment of the second hour. Yeah, we'll have that.
At Southern Bank of Tennessee, we're not just a bank, we're a partner in your progress. With the opening of our new Brentwood branch, we're thrilled to continue supporting local businesses like yours. Experience the power of local decision-making and benefit from our innovative solutions designed to manage your business more efficiently with local
President Trump is sick.
So Hutton and all of them are in New Orleans as well.
Okay.
There, so
Mhm.
if you want to mention anything.
Okay.
Perfect.
And he's gonna get on.
Location off Maryland Way and see what makes us the bank for small business.
Has he had some shrimp etouffee? Some po' boys? Some
He's down in
muffaletta?
he's down in New Orleans. I'm surprised he on. Shit, in New Orleans.
Well, I wonder what Bourbon Street is like now after what happened on New Year's Eve. Like, I wonder what the security detail is like.
Mhm.
Hey, Will, do you want to do the liners after Hutton?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And does I can send the whole, like, all the liners that you're doing and not send it separately, or do you want it separately?
He says a WAV file would be ideal.
Uh-huh. And just the whole front of it?
Huh?
The whole front of it is good?
The whole what?
Oh, like, do I need to make separate files?
No, just one. He'll figure it out. Let him do the editing or whatever. Yeah.
You wanna make it-
He got another look on his face now. He changed his look.
Now he seems like, huh.
Hmm. About Russo.
His old mama. He's forgot his wife's birthday. He's admitted that his daughter gave him gummies right in front of his wife. And then when she looked at her daughter like she was crazy, he turned around and said to his own daughter, "You're on your own."
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, joined by Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. I understand that Hutton is at Radio Row, the site of the big game, because we're not, for some reason, allowed to say what the actual game is. I don't get it. But Hutton, I hope that you're full of football and shrimp etouffee and po' boys and beignets and all of the delicious things that New Orleans has to offer.
So far, so good, guys. Yeah, here Radio Row, which is more like streaming row now, because everyone is streaming in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's been a good first day for me. I know Stillman's been doing great work earlier this week, and then we'll continue. I saw him with some cool people over at the table. So hope you guys are doing well in Nashville.
We're doing the best we can. So let's talk about the other team in the Super Bowl. Am I allowed to say Super Bowl? Let's talk about the other team in the big game, the Philadelphia Eagles, because there is so much attention, of course, on the Kansas City Chiefs. We were talking about Jalen Hurts yesterday. Now, Jalen Hurts is one of, I believe it was 8 quarterbacks in NFL history to have 2 Super Bowl starts within his first 5 seasons in the league. I think we could all agree. We don't talk about Jalen Hurts in the quote unquote elite category. We're not going to put him in the category with Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But I feel like he's not that far behind. What do you think a win for the Eagles in this Super Bowl? Not just the fact that they are going to win the Super Bowl, but the fact that they could knock off the budding dynasty of the Chiefs. What would that do for Jalen Hurts and his perception around the NFL?
I mean, think about the significance of Jalen Hurts 1, Joe Burrow 0. You know, like if you're just talking about Super Bowl wins, like that. Same thing for with Josh Allen. So his contemporaries take I won't say a back seat because they're going to continue to be in the MVP conversation. But it's let's throw Nick Sirianni in the mix too, if we're going to discuss Hurts too. I mean, this is his second. It's it doesn't get enough attention, and that he's done a nice job. I think he does a better job leading than what he gets credit for. I think the whole AJ Brown thing with him is maybe the perception there is a bit skewed because of his friendship with AJ and then how things have been weird. But they've been able to keep it together, and that's after last year's collapse at the end. So I think he's going to look. I'm interested to see if the Chiefs end up stopping in any part of the game, stopping Saquon Barkley, which is probably not going to happen. He's going to get his. But if the Chiefs find a solution to the tush push just 1 or 2 times, how does that affect Jalen Hurts needing to step up and make a play on 3rd down, and needing to set a play in a crucial moment? That's where he will really be defined in this game. And if they have a chance to really take down Mahomes in what Mahomes and Kansas City does so well, which is close out games, can Hurts do that? If he does, he's moving on to a chance to do what not many few quarterbacks do, Adam, and that's win multiple Super Bowls. And it's not a team and a quarterback coach combo that we think of in that regard.
Did you hear DeAndre Hopkins' quote from Super Bowl opening night about the end of his Titans tenure? Okay. We talked about this at length yesterday. I heard Jared talk about it. Jared, doing what Jared typically does, said it was a culture problem with the Titans, that DeAndre Hopkins pouted and took himself out of the game, and the Titans acquiesced to his every desire by trading him to the Chiefs. When you heard those comments, what was your first gut reaction about what they meant, not just for Hopkins, but for the Titans as well?
Well, I thought this happened in the Buffalo game at the beginning of the 4th quarter. And here's what I thought about. Keith Bullock is what I thought about. Keith Bullock refused to come out of the game in a 59-0 beatdown in New England. And if nothing else, he started the game, he's going to finish it. That was his mentality. D-Hop is one of the more consistent players, and for whatever reason, they weren't thrown in the football. I don't get that part. But he knew he was being traded. And the headlines to follow up in the locker room and throughout the next week or so before the trade deadline was, so I guess he's on the trading block now because you got to keep him healthy. I mean, everyone's discussion of that was correct. But they played the behind the scenes game of, oh, no, nothing's wrong. I mean, even Callahan was kind of confused by it with the way he reacted in real time in post game. I mean, so in terms of culture and communication and all that, I think that moment is in some small portion of the season a good example of kind of how just crazy and like everything just kind of thrown in the mix it was, and not knowing how to handle that in the moment. And look, is it the end of the world? No. They did him a favor by trading him to Kansas City for the type of return, especially when you look at what we saw from other trades of wide receivers that were basically the same. And we're talking about DeAndre Hopkins here, who I bet makes a play on Sunday and helps the Chiefs three-peat.
Excuse me. Hut,
hey, by the way,
yeah.
Mace, I don't think I'm not saying that Hopkins is a diva for doing this.
Mhm.
Stay healthy, go play for a contender. I get it, but man, I mean, how much did we discuss? There's not many like true leaders on that team.
No,
and that was a moment where you can at least just finish the game.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue that I have with the situation. Listen, I've said this before. You don't know how you're reacting in situation until you're put in that situation. D-Hop had never been in this situation that he was in this year with the Tennessee Titans. He was always the guy that was replacing the guy, Andre Johnson, and then Larry Fitzgerald. So he was always that guy. He was never in a position where they brought somebody else in to replace him, and he was there real time with them. And he didn't know how to sort of handle it, especially with them losing as well. Him sitting on the sideline, that I didn't agree with. But I understood sort of, what he was going through, because I went through it myself, them drafting a young guy and knowing eventually that they want him to be the guy, or bringing in a free agent, knowing eventually they want that guy to be the number one guy. You got to figure out how to handle it. And especially when your team's winning. In his case, his team wasn't winning. So that sort of magnified what he was doing, because I knew once they showed the picture of him behind Brian Callahan, I said one or two things are happening right now. Either he's taking himself out of the game, or the Titans have removed him from the game because they're going to trade him. And I guess I was right on both, because he did take himself out of the game, and the Titans did trade him.
Do you know the score going into the fourth quarter of that game?
I can't even remember.
17-10.
It was a close game.
Yeah. Now, I mean, he wasn't getting the football, and they scored 17 points. The Bills did in the fourth quarter. Point being, like it was. I wouldn't have done what he did. I wouldn't have done what he did. Let's just say that I wouldn't have did that. Now I understand how he felt. I get that. Yeah.
But if
you know what else is different, Mace? He's also not used to not getting the football.
Exactly. But he sat there and said he's not a volume like a football guy, when in fact his career is based on volume catches.
Yeah. And let me also throw this in. This was during the stretch where they chose to go with Mason Rudolph during this difficult stretch of Buffalo and Detroit. And who knows what was going through his mind in that regard, because, his guy was Levis going back to the season prior. He got a lot of looks through Will Levis, and that certainly wasn't the case during that stretch at all.
Now, what has been the talk there of the Tennessee Titans, if there is any? And I'm not talking about aside from the DeAndre Hopkins, what he said, but as far as, them hiring a new GM, what they think about it, the number one pick and everything else.
Well, number one, speaking of number one, I've yet to find someone in person that would say, I'll draft Shedeur or I'll draft Cam Ward, and just chatting. Everyone is trading down in this draft. Even, Thomas Dimitroff, who is known for being aggressive whenever he was the general manager of the Falcons. Even he said he would trade down in this draft. So if everyone's looking to trade down, maybe you go with just the best player on your board here with the Titans. Again, I would love to trade down if I'm Tennessee. I don't know if the return is going to be as great as what we may think because of the number 1 pick. Nonetheless, the other talk, Mace, I chatted with Jeffrey Simmons today. He is still irritated and pissed off, I guess is the best way, about any questions in regards to last season. Just immediately, no, last season's over. I'm done with it. That very quick.
Mhm.
We know he was tight with Rand. He was also tight with J-Rob, and he's been through a lot of change recently, but he's also very close with Amy Adams Strunk. And I asked him, I said, if you're not going to discuss 2024, let's discuss the future, 2025. What do you see? And he discussed leadership. He discussed culture. He's hitting all the key words, but he's going to have to be the guy. I mean, if you start to look around and think about the true emotional and lead by example guys, I mean, he's the dude that can really get it going. Like one of the true good players on the team. And I think he's looking at it from the lens of, okay, let's get the best players and let's continue to build, because right now he's seen a lot of change recently and not a lot of wins, and he is not happy about it, which is a good and a bad thing, because again, he's a part of it with the penalties, which he also touched on and said it was on him.
We're talking to Jonathan Hutton. Hud, I'm curious, in your circles, first impressions of Mike Borgonzi. I know he hasn't been there very long, but what's the early sense of his presence, how he's going to go about things?
Confident, prepared is another word I would use. So he was able to, I know he's more pro personnel side of things for the most part. He's done everything. But Veach, from what I was told, Willie, let him more or less over the shoulder kind of see everything in the inner workings of the day-to-day operations of what he did as GM in Kansas City over the last 12 to 15 months, which is great for him. And, I think the other sense I get is everyone figured it was his time. When you're 16 years at a spot, and that's, you start to see how people climb the ladder. And then you see the ladder that he was able to climb with the Kansas City Chiefs and how they built their roster. The key contributors, it fits the mold of exactly what the Titans are saying. It's just not what the Titans have been doing. Draft, develop, retain. That's what Kansas City does so well, better than anyone. And they don't necessarily have to do it in the first, second, or third rounds. They get great value there, and they select great players there. But go look at some of the 6th and 7th round picks that have just been role players, but huge assets in key moments of critical playoff matchups. They're playing so many tight window ball games right now, and they have people that just step in and execute. They don't turn it over. They are poised, and they close out games. And that's the opposite of the Tennessee Titans. Now they've got the guy who has been there to see how that was built, to try to replicate what it is that the Titans need most. It's a similar situation to, it's not exact, but I mean, John Robinson was known for the Patriot way, and he was brought in to revamp what was a franchise without much to point to. And he was able to do it with those first 3 years. So, I mean, I think it's also a comparison that's worthy of mentioning there, because I think Borgonzi, with those that know him and know what the discussion was within the Kansas City organization, feel like he's also at that point where he's ready for the opportunity, much like J-Rob was coming from Tampa.
With their cap situation, coming off of a year where they did dip in heavily to the free agent market, they've been pretty clear that they don't want to do that again. They want to draft and develop. But in the meantime, what do you have any sense of whether all of those guys are going to be back this year, or do you feel like they might, in a Mike Borgonzi, okay, let me erase, this didn't work, or this isn't a guy I would have signed? Do you think you might see a change or two based on that to either create a little bit more cap space or go in a different direction in free agency?
Yeah, I mean, in thinking about the money spent last year, Willie, I mean, there's a lot of money that's already accounted for right now that you wouldn't dump on. Like, you know,
Right.
it
I guess
was
that's
just-
where I'm going. It's like you want flexibility if you're a new GM, right? And if you're locked in
no doubt.
to some guys, are there some moves you have to make accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm trying to think of like a Harold Landry, maybe. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Uh,
he's not a guy that I thought about, but obviously Landry has a
money-wise.
he's got a big chunk of he's got a big cap hit, right? There's no way around that.
Yeah, and so I mean, the base salary would just be in cash, but you've got like different bonus options coming up. Look, I mean, it's Ridley, it's Landry, L'Jarius Sneed's going to be up there, and Simmons. Like those are, Amani Hooker's got to be in the top 7 or 8 players too. A lot of players on defense is what I'm seeing. So, you know, if they're going to spend money, maybe they go at the right tackle situation and try to, or, you know, left tackle and move someone to right. Yeah, again, I think you could spend money and address the offensive line. Do you want to move players? I do know this. They've discussed a lot about that mantra, right? Draft, develop, retain. They've also said they want draft picks. And there's not too many players that you can point to that are going to give you a return that's something that would live up to the expectation that they're discussing, right? So I mean, I think we named the players that could get some type of return on value draft time. And I think Landry and Hooker would be around the top of that just based on contract situation and what's coming forward for them. Willie, I think the money that they spent last year, unless, you know, they would take such a cap hit, right? With the cap number, I think Ridley's cap number is like 28. I mean, it's brutal. So you can't move that.
Yeah, I wouldn't think a big name like that. I was thinking like an Awuzie or a Murray
Oh, okay.
or somebody that maybe they spent and Borgons is like that's not my kind of guy. I think we
Like
can
a
do
Tony
better.
Pollard?
Well, I would be surprised because
Me
what's
too.
what's the alternative? So I guess we're looking at
Kenneth
they're sort of
Murray?
locked
I'm just
into
trying to
some of
think
these
of the
guys.
other
Yeah,
guys.
Murray and
Yeah.
Awuzie would be the two that I would circle
Yeah.
as I'm curious what they might do there. There's a long list of guys they bought, but
Well, the other one would be L'Jarius Sneed because, you know, he was, according to reports, he's the one who helped negotiate that trade with, you know, with Brinker.
now that
know?
would be something. I think Snead will be back next year.
I
for sure,
agree.
right?
You have to you know, hope and pray that if you're them that he's healthy. He's a solution, not another injury issue. Yeah, I'm with you.
Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow, live from Radio Row in New Orleans, where there's some sort of big game going on. Again, I'm not allowed to say it in this context. Hutton, have a great time in New Orleans. Enjoy the rest of Radio Row.
Yes, I'm already tired of all the officiating discussion here, but the NFL brought it on themselves here at the big game.
Thanks, Hutton. Talk soon.
Yeah, later, guys.
Yep.
Jonathan Hutton joining us. Let's react to some of what Hutton had to say. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingate, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Happy Hump Day. Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal or a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to come up a little short. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize their program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Vingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingen here with you. We just had a bit of a laughing fit in the studio during the break. So Willie was recording what are called billboards. So if you watch Predators hockey on FanDuel Sports Network, they're coming back from commercial, and you hear Willie say, Nashville Predators hockey, brought to you by, and he had his, what he called his game show voice on. And all I was thinking about the whole time was Kramer doing the movie phone on Seinfeld. that is why I started laughing so hard.
I just saw that one the other day, the movie phone.
Yes.
What movie would you like to see?
That's the voice.
Right?
You're doing the
Yeah.
voice right now. Oh, man. The stream, if only the stream were live during commercial breaks. Actually, I don't want you to see what happens when we're not on the air. It's usually me stuffing my face with my lunch and God knows what else. Anyway, so we were just talking to Jonathan Hutton. And Willie, you brought up something interesting at the end about some of the accounting that Mike Borgonzi could possibly do as the new Titans GM. He gets the ledger. He sees the contracts that are signed, the money he has to pay, and maybe he wants to trim the fat a little bit. I do think this is an interesting aspect of the Titans offseason. I know we are dead set focused on the number one pick and everything that comes with it, but I'm curious to see some of the other moves that Mike Borgonzi makes with the current Titans roster.
I just think when a new GM comes in, you got a new set of eyes. And I think even we just got done with a very detailed conversation about Barry Trotz and what happens, right? You have your ideas of what you think is going to work for the coming season. And then when that season's over, you go back through it and say, okay, we just signed all these free agents. Which ones worked? Which ones didn't work? And what's the best pathway forward? Can there be a bounce back on a player? Let's just take one. Chido Awuzie, right? Got hurt right from the get-go, lost season, barely played. What's Mike Borgonzi's thought? What's Chad Brinker's thought? What's the coach? What's Denard Wilson's thought about what do we do about that next year? Should we cut our losses, take whatever money we can save, and go get another guy? Or do we think him, Cheeto, is going to bounce back and be a good player for us next year? Kenneth Murray, he was thought to be a really good fit for a Denard Wilson defense. He's a talented player when it comes to physical tools. He was a first-round pick, but he did not grade very well in the Pro Football Focus's sites, things like that. He graded very poorly. I don't know if Denard Wilson would disregard that and say, no, he did what we asked him to do. He's a good fit. So I'm using two examples of guys that, don't break the bank, but you paid decent amounts of money in free agency to try to fill holes. And so when a new general manager comes in to evaluate, what are his thoughts on guys like that? And you can take it all the way down the right. I don't think they're going to replace Calvin Ridley, right? No. There's too much invested in him, even if you didn't like him. And he was reasonably productive. Another guy you guys mentioned wasn't a free agent, but L'Jarius Sneed is a really interesting one of what to do about him, right? Because they've got to have production from him with what they're paying him, and he's going to be coming off of a surgery. So you guys see what I'm saying there, right? Doesn't that make sense? When you do inventory of your roster, I'm wondering what Borgonzi sees when he sees, okay, let's look at the autopsy or the aftermath of all that money you guys spent last year that I had nothing to do with. He can be the fresh guy that says, guys, I don't know what you were thinking on XYZ, but I'm here to tell you we need to clear the decks and cut our losses on these guys.
Even with guys like Jerome Baker, that you may think that, okay, we need to move on from him and go in another direction because this team realistically, and when you start to do things like that, even though they are like second, they're not tier one players. Let's just say that you are signaling a rebuild. Even when you are looking to get away from guys like Chidobe Awuzie or Jerome Baker or Amani Hooker or a Harold Landry, even when you're looking to get, and those are guys that are sort of either came on late or seems to be aging out a little bit in regards to Harold Landry and Amani Hooker. Even with guys like that, you're still signaling to everyone, this is going to be a rebuild. Because typically what you're doing is, and they've said it, we're not looking to free agency to build our roster. So don't be looking for them if indeed they say go away from these certain players. And it may not be all these players. Let's just say one of them.
Yeah, just
Or
one or
two.
two. Well,
Yeah.
let's give an example. When Rand Carthon came in, what did he do? He circled the contract of Kevin Byard.
Yes.
And said, wow, that's a big number.
Mhm.
What can we do about that? Should we do something about that?
Mhm.
And that was kind of, it got out,
Yeah.
right? It got out that he was doing that, and that created a big buzz and stir. And as it turned out, Rand Carthon was right in
Yeah.
saying that Kevin Byard isn't worth that number anymore. So he wasn't wrong to take a look at that.
No.
You can say, hey, he let it get out. That's not good. Or that it got public and Byard wasn't happy. But at the bottom line was
He knew,
he saw that
he
that
saw it,
wasn't
yeah.
good value for what they were paying.
Exactly. Hence, he's not on Chicago anymore. Well, he's not on Philadelphia anymore. Is he on Chicago still?
I think he's
Byard?
still on the
He
on the
may
Bears.
be on the Bears roster. So
So
I learned that Kyle
Hut,
Phillips is on the Eagles practice squad. A lot of ex-Titans representation
go.
in the big game.
so Hut brought up Harold Landry. He's the second most expensive player on the Titans right now, behind Calvin Ridley. He's 29. I think that they will stand pat, but that is one where, okay, is there a better solution? How would you work with that? I wouldn't have brought up his name. I think because he's a steady pro. You might as well just pay the bill, get what you
at
get
least for this season.
Mhm. But these are all creative things that I'm sure they're talking about. I'm just kind of setting the table. What are we going to see with this new group?
615-737-1025. If you have thoughts on that, you can get them in on our phone and text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Actually, text line, because coming up next, Vanderbilt men's basketball coach Mark Byington will join us. We'll discuss the Commodores and the cutthroat SEC. Coming up next, Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Pleased to be joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Vanderbilt head men's basketball coach Mark Byington. Mark, thank you so much for joining the program today.
I appreciate you guys having me on. We had a tough night last night, so late night and bounce back. But life in the SEC.
We're absolutely going to talk about life in the SEC, but let's talk about last night's game. A tight loss, 86-75 at Florida. A tough loss on the road before that against Oklahoma. Your team was leading at halftime in both of those games on the road. Wasn't able to close it out. When you look at the film of these games, what were some of the differences between your first half performance and your second half performance that you'd like to correct?
Yeah, I mean, different types of second half in both the games. So both first games, the Oklahoma first half, we played really well for 17 minutes, and then the last 3 minutes going into half, it kind of started. Defensive mistakes, turnovers. We were compounding mistakes, and on the road, those are amplified. And then carried in the second half where we just did not execute on offense and didn't guard the way we guarded in the first half. And similar, to last night where, I think it was more them in Florida. I think it was them being good. Now, we don't have a lot of room for error. So if you kind of look at it, we missed 2 layups that were, very makeable layups. We missed the front end of a 1-and-1, and all of these are going on while it's a 3 or 4 point game. And we couldn't overcome that. And so then they made the plays they needed to down the stretch. But I was happy the way we played against Florida. We competed, played well, did everything right, and sometimes credit where credit's due. I wasn't happy at all the way we played against Oklahoma the game before that.
You mentioned life in the SEC. I heard Jay Billis, ESPN analyst, do an interview recently where he said winning the SEC tournament is going to be harder than winning the national championship because you're doing it day after day after day, and you're playing better teams throughout the course of that SEC tournament. That just speaks to the depth of talent and high-quality teams that are in the SEC. We look at Vanderbilt's schedule and we marvel at the top 25 matchups you're facing on a nightly basis. There are no easy games in the SEC. So how has that been like for you as a first-year coach with your new team navigating this gauntlet that is the SEC?
Well, it's just relentless. And if you look down your schedule and keep on looking down, you're like, it could be mentally exhausting and kind of put you in a bad place. Because you're like, all right, another top 10 team coming, road game, SEC. And even like we played Oklahoma last week. Oklahoma was in the top 25 for 4 weeks, and they got a lottery pick, and people don't know how good they are. So it's one of those things where you just got to take it at one game at a time and put everything into that game. And the problem that people understand is you could play really well and lose because the other team is just that good. And so we just got to control, doing the best we can, being the best we can. And we've been good at home. We've only got one road win in the SEC, but at the same time, I think we're a really good basketball team. Sometimes they don't always translate into wins.
We'll talk with Vanderbilt's head men's basketball coach, Mark Byington. Now, Coach, I can complain about it. I'm sure that you will not go down this road, but in regards to the officiating, I thought it was a little bit inconsistent, but that's just me. But how do you, when a game is going one way, because it was a physical game last night against Florida, but then toward the end of the game, you start seeing what was physical play early on. Now that same physical play is being called as a foul. How do you get your team to adjust?
Yeah, I mean, you do got to adjust to the style of how the game's being officiated. Now, I got a player on my team, Jalen Carey. His dad played for the Miami Dolphins, and And Jalen Carey's dad said it's rougher than football out there half the games. And you know, if you're sitting up close to these SEC games, I mean, it is combative. The rebounds, the physicality, the screens, and you know, we got to try to be that way. We're not the tallest team. I do think we are tough, and so sometimes we're not 6'11", but we might be 6'8" and tough, and we got to battle out there. We can't lose the physicality part. So every game's being officiated with that kind of going into it. And then there's other times where certain things are called. You just got to adjust to it.
Okay. Now, Jason Edwards, what has he meant to your team? Because this young kid is electrifying. It seems like when he's in a game, it's a different type of energy and a different type of tempo.
Well, he's all go all the time. You know, when he has the ball, I mean, he's trying to attack you. He's trying to score. He's trying to make a play. And you know, we need that. You need to have dynamic guards in this league. And so there has to be somebody who can make a play when there is not a play there. The good teams have them. And, you know, so the really good teams have a couple of those guys. But the fact that he can make a play just with natural talent, aggressiveness, his quickness, his skill set, I mean, it's much needed on our team for sure.
We're talking to Mark Byington, the head coach for the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're next in action against Texas on Saturday, and a big one for them. Coach, one thing as I watch college hoops these days, the way it's evolved, especially the last few years since the COVID rules changed. When I was playing, maybe the oldest guy you would face might, as a fifth-year senior, turn 23 during the season. Now it's routine. Every team, and your team is would be an example. You've got a lot of 22-year-olds, maybe even a 23, sprinkle in a 24. I'm so impressed with a guy like Tyler Tanner. And as you've pointed out, Jalen Carey is in his second year, but he's still very, very young. The way those guys go up against the older players is very impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be, you know, you got to have a different type of mindset because, I mean, you guys have all been a part of it. You go down to the park and you play the old man and he gets you. And just because of that old man strength and size and experience and everything else, well, they're going up against that. And you're so accurate in this where a couple of years ago, you know, this is even before the COVID, you know, college basketball was getting young. There was a ton of one and dones and two and done type of players that were leaving. Well, what you're seeing right now in college basketball, you're seeing players that could be second round NBA picks, but because of the NIL package they get more money in college than they do be the second round pick, so they'll stay. Well, you're getting really good players and talented players staying around, especially in the SEC. There's multiple guys that could have left this SEC last year and be a fringe NBA player or second round pick, but they're playing right now in SEC play.
When Adam and I talked to you right after you were hired, it was as maybe you guys had just a handful of workouts in the summer. I think you were just getting to know your guys and putting them together. I think everybody who's watched your team has been impressed with how quickly they have gelled together. They play for each other. They're unselfish. It's fun to watch when you guys get it going. What do you really attribute? Because you can do everything you can, but a lot of the players have to buy into that to play the way they do for a bunch of new guys that had never played together before. How do you attribute that?
Yeah, they do have to buy in. They have to care about winning. And a lot of times guys right now want to chase stats or chase individual achievement. And you got to make sure they care about winning first. And then the individual stuff will come if you're successful. People will recognize your team. And so you're trying to do all that before they get to campus. You're trying to do background checks and figure out if they are that way. But you know what? It's also something we got to work on every single day. And it's a lot of outside distractions and outside voices, and they got to be unified. When we come in that locker room, understand that, look, this is about us. And I told them last week, this is we season. This isn't me season. So right now it's we. And then, everything's in front of us. There's opportunities up and down in our schedule, and there's chances for all of us to be successful. But we got to buy into the we part, not the me part. When
you watch, I'm asking this, I guess, more as somebody who would ask this to represent the local basketball scene, like Tyler Tanner is a really unique talent. He's got some skill set that's really exciting. Tell me what you see from him. Where he's going. His on-ball defense, that some of those little heady things, it doesn't turn into a ton of points every night, but you can see these little things and you start projecting that over a couple years. It looks pretty exciting.
Well, it starts with his character. You're not going to find a better person. And I was joking around to somebody today. I'm 48, but he makes me a better person every day I'm around him, and that's a lot for an 18-year-old. And so the other thing that's extremely impressive on him is he's so eager to learn that he doesn't make the same mistake twice. And if you watch in our film sessions, he's right in the front row. His eyes are open. If you're talking, he's listening, and he's processing it. And he'll learn from his mistakes or others' mistakes, but he won't repeat them. And so now you kind of keep seeing him getting better and better and better. And when that's your habit and that's your approach, that's not going to stop. So he's going to continue getting better every single game, every single season.
I imagine when you first got hired that you didn't really have time to sit around and say, hey, let's look around. Let's see what Nashville, Tennessee is all about. You really had to hit the road and find a brand new team, basically. Now here we are a few months later. What are your impressions of the Nashville scene, the Vanderbilt scene? How has that been for you?
Well, I still haven't had much days off and time to chill. But yeah, you're right on. When I first got the job, it was like I was in the middle of a hurricane, and you're just trying to figure it out and try to do the best you can in that situation. And now you're in the season, you're kind of in the same mode. When I bring recruits in town and I show them Nashville, sometimes I'm seeing it for the first time just like they are. I was like, I had no idea that was there, or this part of town, or this restaurant. And but the city's great. The students have been tremendous this year on campus. They've been supportive. We got to keep them off the court. They got to quit rushing the court. Now, hopefully, we got some more worthy opportunities where they could rush the court, but we got to keep them off the court. But the reception, the fans. It's a hunger fan base that just wanted to be a part of something, and they're helping us build it.
Speaking of building it, you come in and you've seen all the cranes and all the construction, the Vandy United project, and I know there was a real special ceremony not too long ago. You've been in that building for a while now, but now everybody gets to see it. Tell me what that means to you and your program to have that state-of-the-art brand new facility right next to Memorial Gym.
Yeah, we have the George Huber Center, and it is unbelievable practice facility and training facility. So it's not just we just play basketball in there. The offices, the technology, the film room, the training room, the weight room is state of the art, and that's what you need, for players to come in and to be able to compete in the SEC. There were some things that are outdated when I first got to campus, and I was glad that I got here. And be able to use the Huber Center to be able to help recruit, to be able to help players train, and our players love it. I love it. Every day I walk into the office, it just puts you in a good mood because you have everything at your disposal.
Vanderbilt men's basketball coach Mark Byington joining us. Mark, you mentioned the court storming. I just want to ask if you've had any success setting up that GoFundMe page you mentioned recently.
I think somebody else was supposed to do that. I'm the idea guy. I come up with the ideas, and then somebody else has to execute it.
Well, let me ask you a question that the three of us discussed earlier this week. Court storming is it's a big part of college athletics, but the SEC levies fines for that, and when you include the field storming against Alabama with the football program, Vanderbilt has had to cut checks to Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky, totaling $850,000. And Candace Story-Lee reportedly was on the sideline at the end of the Kentucky game, asking students not to rush the court so that money could be spent on NIL and bringing in players to Vanderbilt. Generally speaking, it's not something that students think about in the moment, but in today's landscape, I'm curious for your opinion on where that money could be going that is now going somewhere else because of court storming? Is my roundabout way of asking this question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where the exactly how the money comes and where it goes out, and then the administration takes care of that. The court storming, it can be unsafe, and that's why they do it. And you do see, sometimes you got a student with too much to drink, and then they want to see, the middle linebacker from Alabama and talk some trash to him, and that's probably not a good move at that time. And so there's some things that could happen in those. It's almost, if it's ever done just the right way, it's a great memory. It's a great thing for the school, but there's some safety things that's the reason they got to do it. I've been a part of both sides of it. I've been a part where they stormed against me. I've been part of the storm. And it's great to look on television. Sometimes in the middle of it's pretty hectic.
Yeah, no question. Coach, before we let you go, let's can you give us a little bit on Texas? Because as you mentioned with Oklahoma, Texas probably doesn't get the headlines that a number 4 Tennessee, a number 5 Florida, like last night, Alabama, but they're a really good team, obviously. So what do you see when you look at Texas?
Well, they got the SEC's leading scorer, and he's a freshman, Trey Johnson. He's going to be top 5, 6, 7 pick in the NBA draft. He's a shot maker, and he's incredible at it. So you can see the NBA like talent and moves in him. Another backcourt guy, Jordan Pope, big inside, athletic. It's almost the same thing every single time you go into a game. Like talented, well coached. It's a team that, I know they're playing really well. They got off to a start in the SEC. They were 0-3, and then they won a bunch of games. Texas A&M and Oklahoma, and they play Arkansas tonight, and they're playing really good. So it's every single night is a huge challenge. But you're going to see a talented roster with them and a well-coached team. So it's a noon game on Saturday. So I hope we wake up early and ready to play.
Vanderbilt men's basketball coach Mark Byington joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Good luck this weekend against Texas.
I appreciate y'all having me on.
Our pleasure. Mark Byington joining us on the program. The Commodores are back in action at home at Memorial Gym against Texas at noon on Saturday. 615-737-1025. We'll continue the show next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. We're going to talk the big game. The big game! Again, I don't know why I'm not. I don't understand what the rules are here. When can I say Super Bowl? Oops, was I not supposed to say Super Bowl? I don't know the rules around here.
Hey.
Ignorance is bliss as far as I'm concerned. So quickly, we're going to have what I would call the easiest Super Bowl week conversation we could probably have. We just want to work it in here before the end of the show. And it was brought to our attention by Willie. There's an article in The Athletic. Patrick Mahomes versus the man who is going to be calling his game this weekend, Tom Brady. According to Austin Mock at The Athletic, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, there will be a new playoff GOAT, of course, greatest of all time, Patrick Mahomes over Tom Brady. And look, these are the conversations that are had on every sports talk radio station, every barbershop, every bar. Who's better, X or Y? But I thought the argument laid out here by Austin Mock on The Athletic was interesting. I know it's simple to just look at, well, Brady, how many? 7 Super Bowls for Tom Brady?
7.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to look at Tom Brady and say, well, he's won 7 Super Bowls and Patrick Mahomes hasn't. So therefore, there's no discussion. But if you dig a little bit deeper, I think there's some interesting angles to this.
That's the article. And it's meant to sort of push buttons because I do think, D. Mace, you would agree that, look, nobody's ever had a three-peat. This is part of their argument with Mahomes, is that if you have a three-peat, even though that would only put him at 4, that supersedes Brady with 7. I think you would get a lot of pushback on that. 7 is 7. That's still amazing, but it's over such a long span of time. But I'll throw out a couple of their reasons why they would take Mahomes. But what's your thought when you hear that? Because a lot of people would say, case closed, 7-4, give me the rings, that's it.
Brady dominated. Let's just say dominated. He was in the league 21 years.
Thereabouts.
He dominated at least 15 of them. Let's just say that. To be honest, like 15 of those years, he frankly dominated. And on his way to domination, he beat Patrick Mahomes. On his way to domination, he beat Patrick Mahomes as his swan song. He won 3 titles after the age of 37. 3 of them. And again, can I repeat that he beat Patrick Mahomes in one of those 3 that he won after the age 37? That's just pure dominance. So when you start talking about the greatest at that position, because I don't think either one of them are the greatest football player that has ever played. Neither one of them are even close. But when you're talking about the quarterbacks, which is they reign supreme, I think Brady will continue to be that guy for a few reasons. One, the longevity. And not just the longevity. See, this is why same argument you have about LeBron and Jordan. And this is why, I understand it. Because you look at the longevity of LeBron James. He's been dominating for 20. It ain't like he took a seat back, a step back. He's been dominating for as long as he's been in the NBA. That's why the sort of the comparison for GOAT is so close because of his longevity. Does he have the rings that Michael has? No, he doesn't. But he has longevity. That's the same thing with Tom Brady. But Tom Brady has the rings too. So not only does he have the rings, he has the longevity. He's dominated for 15 years. And look at all the records. He's up there in every statistical record for a quarterback. He's there. Win percentage, everything. So until you do that, and I understand the three-peat means a lot. It really does.
Because it's a first.
It's a first. Exactly.
It would be a first.
It's a first. But Tom did it, and he did it at a high level for so long. And when you had a chance to beat him, when he was in his early 40s or late 30s, you lost.
So for the GOAT, you go with longevity as a
I'm
big
going.
part.
Yeah,
of
I'm
it.
going. With
Well,
Brady.
it's interesting you bring up longevity because that is brought up in this article. The article says, okay, so when we said there was only one argument, longevity, in favor of Brady, that might have been a touch unfair. It should at least be mentioned that Brady is 2-0 against Mahomes in the playoffs, including a Super Bowl victory. However, for those keen to use that argument for Brady, let's remember Eli Manning is 2-0 against Brady in the playoffs,
Mhm.
including 2 Super Bowls, and no one would dare suggest Manning is the superior playoff quarterback. 2 games are too small of a sample to determine much, and head-to-head matchups are too circumstantial to use as significant evidence. So here are some other pieces of evidence that Austin Mock uses. With a win against the Eagles on Sunday, Mahomes will have won 10 consecutive playoff games, which would tie Brady's record from 2001 to 2005. The difference, however, is Brady's Patriots missed the playoffs entirely in 2002, whereas no one has beaten the Chiefs since the 2021 AFC
But he
Championship
didn't.
game.
The caveat is he wasn't the quarterback. Tom Brady got hurt that year, and that's the year they won 11. What was it, 11 or 12 games?
I'm not sure that was
The
that year.
2002 Patriots?
Yeah, I think it was 2000.
I-
He
I-
got hurt
I
because
don't-
there's no
no.
other time where Brady.
Hold on, let's double check that because I remember you guys beat them on a Monday night.
Yeah, but
They were
Brady-
9-7.
Uh-huh.
He was the quarterback that year, wasn't he? That wasn't the
No,
Matt
that
Castle year, was
that
it?
wasn't the Matt Castle year. The 9-7 year, they didn't go to the playoffs.
In 2002, they went 9-7 and missed
Yep.
the playoffs.
And he
Wow,
played all
man.
16 games.
And
That
Tom
wasn't
Brady-
the year he tore his ACL.
Yeah, I was
that
thinking
was
the year he tore his
2008.
ACL. Yeah.
Mahomes already has the second most wins in the playoffs when his team trails by double digits with 5. He's one behind Brady, but Mahomes is 5-2 when down double digits. Brady finished 6-8. So
When did Tom Brady take over?
2001 was his first year.
Okay.
I mean, he was a rookie on the
Mhm.
team in 2000 and barely played.
Okay.
And then 01 is when he came in when Bledsoe got the concussion.
Mhm.
Remember? So then 02, they went 9-7. They won the Super Bowl surprisingly in 01, beat
Mhm.
the Rams, Kurt Warner.
Man,
They
that-
missed the
whew.
playoffs the next year. You guys
Did they?
whipped them on a Monday night in Nashville, cold night. John Madden was there. The field was all painted. Remember they spray painted the
Yes,
field.
yes,
It
and they
wasn't
were
looking
talking
real
about
good.
the
And he
field
was like,
during.
what's
They were
going on?
talking about the field during the broadcast.
But so
Man,
they
see,
missed the playoffs.
But
So
see, you can see that's crazy because you never think of a Tom Brady team missing the playoffs.
that might have been the only one.
Yeah, that might
Because-
have been the only time they missed the playoffs.
another point made in favor of Mahomes. Mahomes' teams have scored 595 points in his first 20 playoff games. Brady's teams scored 455 in his first 20. Want to adjust for era again? Mahomes' 595 points are more than Brady's team scored in his last 20 playoff games too, at 568.
He also points out, Austin, and there's a lot of numbers here,
Mhm.
but he points out that Brady's defenses, as good as Mahomes' defenses are,
Mhm.
Brady's defenses were better
Mhm.
in terms of points allowed, right? I think Brady's teams allowed about 20 points per game. Mahomes' teams have allowed 23 points per game. So being supported by your defense,
Mhm.
Mahomes actually has a higher degree of difficulty, which I don't know if I would have thought. If Mahomes, well, here's where they are now.
Well, not the last 2 years. They can't be counting the last 2 years.
Well, it's all put together,
together,
right? So
yeah.
it's an average of all. So Mahomes is 17-3
Mhm.
in playoff games, 85% winning percentage. Brady 35-13, 73%. Does that surprise you to know that the winning percentage is that different? Like that's pretty impressive. 17-3 in playoff games. Like if you got one of those wins, you're
And
like
Tom
hey,
Brady's what?
35-13.
Well, he's played more games.
a lot more games.
Yeah, a lot more games.
But the
So-
winning percentage is lower,
Yeah,
73%
but as
to
you start,
85%.
but as you start, as we understand this, it's going to change. His number is going to change. There's more than likely.
Right, there's a lot of chapters
exactly.
in
He
Mahomes'
will. It
career.
will start to sort of even out a little bit more. And
You
then
would
once
think.
his
You would
once his
absolutely think,
career is
yeah.
over with, it's like okay, they're practically the same player. But again, I go back to longevity and how long Tom was able to do it. And he stayed at the top of his game. He was the reason why they won games. A lot of them. Because of his 2-minute theatrics at the end. Or something he did throughout the game. He did that for 15 years. Might have been a little bit longer than that, but I see he missed the playoffs in 02, so I don't know.
Longevity.
But he did that, man.
Mahomes really has no argument for longevity. You can't win that argument, right?
But it's not even the longevity.
Let me throw it at
It's the longevity, and he was considered the best quarterback in the league for
all those years.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so let me throw it back at you.
And I know Patrick hadn't. He hasn't reached that. As far as years in the league, I get that part.
If you had to pick one guy in his prime, who would you choose?
That's a tough one, man. That's
because that takes the longevity out of it. Like Tom Brady at his best, Mahomes at his best. Who do you take? Because this is more of a stat argument that Mahomes has better stats, and then a three-peat would put it over the top. He goes through a long list of stats where Mahomes does have an edge over Brady in the games that they have played in the postseason. Is that a fair synopsis of what we're seeing here, Adam?
Yes, I would say so.
See, it's one of these questions where, because like not Peyton, but Tom's prime, man, that was good. But the numbers I don't think the numbers match like yardage with Patrick in that certain era.
It may not be the quarterback you want in your fantasy lineup every Sunday.
But if I'm give me
and
time.
Mahomes is kind of becoming that,
exactly.
Right?
Give me
Mahomes'
time.
stats, he's not throwing for 48 touchdown passes like Dan Marino. He's just playing winning football. We talked about the receivers, and they spend less money on their entire receiving core than A.J. Brown makes.
Yeah.
All of them combined don't make anywhere close to what A.J. Brown himself makes, but Mahomes still has to make up for that.
Exactly. You give me Tom, and it's by a slight edge. I get it. I just got to go with Tom because I seen him operate. I seen it on the field. But I'm taking Peyton over both of them. Peyton in his prime.
What?
Yes.
That wasn't the question.
I know it wasn't a question, but I got to throw that. I'm taking Peyton.
Okay.
Peyton in his prime.
Here's another
I'm taking
thing.
Peyton. That's just me.
That's hard to quantify, but this would be another thing to go along with all these numbers we're throwing out there. Mahomes and his ability to extend plays and run. Obviously, that's not how Brady went about it. But does that factor in? Because Mahomes is obviously a great reader of defense. He does all that stuff, but he has that dimension that we clearly would say that Brady doesn't have.
But to me, Tom, and both of these quarterbacks, I think, read the field extremely well. Tom was just different. And I know Patrick is too. I get that. But physically watching Tom, being on the other sideline, and like, damn, like, there's like, and I'm sure there are players that feel that way about Patrick Mahomes. But if you're asking me, I'm taking Tom in his prime.
I have a clip to play which boils this conversation down to its very essence. David, if you please.
Out of your mind. There is no way that LeBron will ever beat Jordan. Nobody will ever beat Jordan, okay?
Okay, LeBron's a better rebounder and passer.
Will you let me finish? Can you let me finish? Call me when LeBron has 6 championships.
That's your only argument?
It's the only argument I need, Sean.
That's basically what this is.
That's the only argument I need, Sean.
But it's going to turn into, which is great for football, it's going to turn into the Jordan and LeBron comparison each and every time. Unless Patrick wins 7, and then there's no comparison.
which could happen. It very well could happen. That's the only argument I need. 615-737-1025. To wrap up the show, we're going to revisit a story that you probably forgot about from a few months ago. It happened in a big-time spot. Everybody saw it. We're going to revisit this story, catch up with the subject. Coming up next, Willie Donnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3. The Game.
Let's talk Lee Company. 1944 is when that business opened, and ever since then, they've been taking care of all homes around our listening area with their heating, cooling, plumbing, electric, and they go beyond that. General maintenance at your business. You're sitting at your desk right now, you're listening to us, and you're saying, man, that reminds me, got a maintenance problem here in the office, got to take care of it. I'm not a fix-it man. Who do I call? Well, call Lee Company, 615-567-1000. That's 615-567-1000. Or you can even make an online appointment at leecompany.com. Problem solved. Now you can go back to work, keep listening to our show, have a nice rest of the day, and that's off of your plate. You can do that at home as well. And remember, speaking of your home, get the air conditioning unit checked before the weather gets hot. That's my tip for you. That's Lee Company's suggestion. They're always ready to help you in a pinch. Keep that phone number ready, but get ahead of the game. Be proactive. You'll be proud of yourself. 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D. Mace, Finken, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company coming up next live from Radio Row. There's some big game down there. I'm not allowed to say it. I'm going to have to learn what the rules are about when I can say big game and when I can say Super Bowl. I don't know. But Jared's down there. He'll be on at 2 o'clock. He'll have people on. It'll be interesting. He tells me that Jeffrey Simmons will not be appearing on this program. Jonathan Hutton mentioned that Jeffrey Simmons is down on Radio Row. I guess Jeffrey Simmons won't be joining Jared Stillman. I would love to hear that. So, Jared, reconsider if you can. I want to revisit a story that a lot of you probably forgot about. It happened in Game 4 of the World Series at Yankee Stadium. Remember, Mookie Betts, our very own Mookie Betts, went to catch a foul ball at Yankee Stadium, and these two fans pinned his wrist down to the outfield wall and ripped the ball out of Betts's glove. They were thrown out of the stadium. They have since been banned indefinitely from all Major League Baseball stadiums. Banned. You're banned.
As they should.
Absolutely.
Some decorum, please. So the Athletic caught up with Austin Capobianco, who was one of the fans.
Is he from New York? Does he sound like from New York? Austin Capobianco?
Austin Capobianco was one of the fans involved in this. By the way, the other fan involved in this, his name is John Hansen. John Hansen lives in Nashville, according to this story.
Oh, wow.
So there's a local lean to it. But I just want, so this story is about Capobianco trying to show some contrition here. You know, he wishes that he wishes he hadn't done it. He doesn't want the attention. But I just want to read one of the opening anecdotes from this story written in The Athletic. But this winter, not long before Capobianco would receive a letter from Major League Baseball indefinitely banning him from all Major League Baseball stadiums, the arrival of a different sort of delivery left him stunned. He answered a phone call from his brother, who told him that a box had arrived at the doorstep of their parents' house in a sleepy suburb on the shoreline of Connecticut. There was no name on it. It had some weight. Wary to open it, a Google search of the return address led them to a company that specializes in sending anonymous packages filled with a particular substance. It was poop, Capobianco said.
Oh, my Lord. Is that legal? I guess it is. Man. So a company, this is what they do.
That's beside the point.
No, it's not, man.
Someone
There's
had paid
actually
a
a
company
company
to do this.
out there that will do it. Whose poop are they getting? Are they getting like the pooper scoopers when they poop in the dog poop? So then they sell it to those. Like,
right next to a
that is
circus.
a big story. Like, I've never heard that, Adam.
You want an investigation done right away.
Exactly. Damn them two.
Ban those guys from Major League ballparks. The people that are sending the poop.
Exactly. No, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was the anecdote. I did not tell you guys beforehand because I didn't want to spoil it.
Well, so you say I didn't read the whole article.
So the
but
final quote,
he's showing contrition because they did not really show contrition in the moment or even in the day or two after that. They went on shows like, yeah, you did it. You know, I thought it was underplayed on the broadcast in real time.
Uh-huh.
I thought they should have made a bigger deal out of it than they did. And I thought the comedic, hey, look at these wise guys, and they tried to do this. And there was a lot of Yankee fans in sound bites going, yeah, they got to do it. You got to try to win. Your team's trying to win. They didn't get it. Like that, you can't do that. That is complete over the line and should not even be joked about, I thought.
Right. And he talks about in the story that he's received harassing phone calls and voicemails, and he's been getting other packages that might not be filled with poop. But the final quote in the story is, he says, "I'm a hero in Yankees land. I'm a villain in America. I don't really care. I just want to be forgotten about it. I want to be forgotten about. That's it. I want people to forget about me." Well, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want a box full of poop sent to my doorstep either. But if you do something as egregious as what he did, there are consequences for your actions. So you might have to eat a little poop,
I don't,
so to speak.
I don't prescribe to harassment in phone calls or whatnot, or harassment of any kind.
Right. Get a life at some point.
But you got to understand, man, when you do something like that, there's going to be consequences for it. Like you said, some people love that you did that. You know, Yankee fans, they love you. But then there are going to be a lot of people that just think you're an idiot. and you're gonna get packages that have poop in it. Okay, I want to know the company that sends the poop packages. I got some people I want to send some poop packages.
I was about to say.
Okay,
Teammates, the rest of his day is shot. He's gonna go. He's gonna be investigated as
We're
soon as
gonna
the
get
show's
text.
over.
We're gonna get text from Derek tonight.
Yeah.
Guys, I found it. I found the website. Here it is. Who should I send?
anonymously. Oh man.
Can we FedEx Express it to Jared's hotel room in New Orleans? That's what's going
If
down.
I'm sending it to Jared, I'm gonna put my name on it.
If this guy's learned his lesson, then okay, better late than never, right? That's hopefully
But
what
it
the
doesn't
punishment
seem like
is
he
designed
he
to do.
learned
And I agree. It's after a while, it's like just
Yeah.
let the man live his life. He did what he did. I didn't like right away when they were kind of defiant about it. Like, yeah, man, I'm trying to help my team win. That's not how it works when you're a fan. You are not in the game. And any fan would react if there's a foul ball.
And it was
we talked-
premeditated. If I recall
Well, that's the-
correctly, it was premeditated. This was not a Steve Bartman situation where
Right.
the guy just went for the foul ball and fumbled it and everything fell apart after that.
But
They
Right.
knew what they were doing. They knew what they were going to do. They pinned Mookie Betts' wrist to the wall. Like, I'm kind of surprised he didn't suffer a serious injury in that situation.
Listen,
serious is one thing, but maybe even if it just sprains his wrist
Yeah.
and it affects your at bat a little bit, that's
Right.
just that should never happen.
my thing is, listen, you did it or y'all did it. If you were right after contrite about it, it's like, listen, I just got caught up in the heat of the moment. You know, Yankees my team, and man, I just wanted. It's okay. I'm sorry that I did it.
Yeah.
Sorry to Mookie. Whatever. If you do it right then and there, then okay. All right. People is like, all right, he apologized. But they went on to sort of double down and triple down on what they did, and they made it fun for them. Well, listen, all right, you asked for it, you got it. Okay. You asked for the attention, now you getting the attention. Now you can't say, oh, what? I don't want the attention no more. Everybody just forget about me. You had an opportunity for everybody to forget about you. If you would have come out, you and your buddy, and say, listen, right after it happened, I ain't doing no interviews or nothing. Or even if I had done the interviews, listen, I shouldn't have done it. Caught it in the heat of the moment, man. I'm sorry to the Dodgers. I'm sorry to the Yankees that I did it, but I just got caught up. You and your buddy didn't do that. So if nobody wants to forget about you, if they want to continue to point at you or write about you, I don't prescribe harassment. But if they want to write about you or somebody say, hey, aren't you the guy? Then this is what you asked for, isn't it?
This is what upset me. The next day, they did an interview with Barstool, and Barstool likes to play up this kind of things, right? And this was the quote of this guy. So this is where he sort of brought it on himself. We always joke about the ball in our area. We're not going to go out of our way to attack. If it's in our area, we're going to D up. Someone defends, someone knocks the ball. We talk about it. We're willing to do this. No, that's not what
Y'all
what
are
we do.
not a part of the strategy, okay?
Right. That's not what a fan does.
The coach didn't bring you into the locker room and say, hey, listen, in this area, y'all play defense, okay? This is a part of the strategy. No, you're not a part of it. So how can y'all sit up there and devise a scheme amongst all of y'all to knock balls down when they come in your area? All y'all need to be suspended if that's the case. But I wouldn't want to do a crime with him either, because he basically told on everybody.
Let me just end the show with this note. If you have ticked off Derek Mason recently, do not open any packages that show up at your door,
Especially if they're hefty.
especially if they have some heft to them. So if you've ticked off Derek Mason
Man.
and you get a package from poopsareus.com, whatever it is, just be forewarned, because Derek has learned something today that he may ultimately use. So this is why you have to stay on his good side. Stoneman and Company, live from Radio Row, big game, Super Bowl, sue me. That's coming up next. 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, wonderful Wednesday. Peace.